What would you do if your own sister tried to sabotage your relationship in a courthouse hallway? Sandra's emotional manipulation went way too far, twisting old messages and planting seeds of doubt, but with the truth survivor schemes. Watch as family secrets, lies, and high-stakes confrontation threatened to tear everything apart. What happens next will shock you. I honestly never thought my sister Sandra would take it this far. Family drama? Sure, we've had our share. But dragging it into the courthouse? That was a whole different level of betrayal. To give you context, I've been dating Ryan for a little over a year. Things were serious but steady, and he'd been nothing but supportive through some rough patches. My sister Sandra, though, she's always had this toxic streak of control. Ever since we were kids, she loved being the centre of attention, twisting situations so that people would side with her. Courthouse part comes in because our family was already there for something unrelated, and my mom was finalising some property paperwork with my uncle David. Nothing scandalous, just dry bureaucratic stuff. But Sandra decided that was the perfect backdrop for a personal ambush. When Ryan came along to support me because honestly, courthouses give me anxiety, Sandra pulled one of her classic moves. She cornered him in the marble hallway outside the clerk's office. The building smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, the kind of place where voices echoed a little too loudly. I heard her voice before I saw her. Ryan, you know she's not telling you the whole truth, right? My stomach dropped. Ryan looked confused, glancing toward me as if silently asking for backup. What are you talking about, Sandra? He said, his voice calm but wary. Sandra crossed her arms, tilting her head in that way she does when she thinks she's about to expose someone. She still talks to Chris, you know, her ex. She tells you she doesn't, but she does. I've seen the messages. It felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. First of all, it was a lie. I hadn't spoken to Chris in months, and Sandra knew that. Second, she chose the courthouse, of all places, knowing Ryan wouldn't want to make a scene in public. It was emotional manipulation 101. Are you serious right now? I snapped, stepping closer. My voice echoed against the marble pillars, sharper than I intended. Sandra, stop lying. You know I blocked Chris ages ago. She smirked, like she'd been waiting for me to blow up. That's what you want him to think, but I've seen the screenshots. You're just playing him like you play everyone else. Ryan's jaw tightened. He didn't raise his voice, but he looked between us, clearly caught in the middle. I don't know what's going on here, but this isn't the place, Sandra. My mom came out of the clerk's office right then, holding a manila envelope, with Uncle David trailing behind. What on earth is happening? She asked, her voice low but sharp. Sandra immediately shifted gears, putting on her fake innocent face. I'm just trying to protect Ryan. I don't want him getting hurt. That was the moment I realised this wasn't about me and Ryan. This was about Sandra needing control, even if it meant blowing up my relationship in a courthouse hallway. The worst part wasn't even Sandra's words, it was how calculated they were. She didn't yell, didn't accuse me in a way that would make her look hysterical. No, she lowered her voice just enough to sound like the concerned sister, while I looked like the emotional one raising my voice in the courthouse hallway. Classic Sandra move. Ryan kept his hands in his pockets, eyes darting between me and her, clearly uncomfortable. He wasn't the type to explode, which made him the perfect target for Sandra's manipulations. She thrived in these subtle moments where emotions ran high, but everyone else tried to stay composed. Protect Ryan from what, exactly? My mom asked, narrowing her eyes. Mom's never been blind to Sandra's behaviour, but she usually tried to keep the peace. That day, though, I think even she sensed Sandra was pushing boundaries. Sandra sighed dramatically, brushing her hair over her shoulder like she was carrying the weight of the family on her back. Look, I don't want to air private stuff here, but she's not being honest. I just think he deserves to know. Private stuff? I shot back. Sandra, you're literally making this up out of thin air. You know I haven't spoken to Chris in months, you know that. Uncle David, always the skeptic, muttered. Oh boy, here we go again. He was fiddling with his tie, clearly irritated that the courthouse trip was turning into a family soap opera. Ryan finally stepped forward, his voice steady but clipped. Sandra, unless you have proof, I don't think it's fair to throw this out here, especially not today. For a moment, I thought that would shut her down. But Sandra never one to let go, pulled out her phone. Funny you should say that. My heart stopped. She scrolled quickly, then held the screen up like a trophy. See, right here, messages from Chris. I leaned in, my blood boiling, and instantly realised what she'd done. They weren't my messages, they were all screenshots I'd sent her months ago when Chris wouldn't stop harassing me. I'd forwarded them so she could back me up if he showed up at family gatherings. And now she was twisting them. Were you kidding me? I nearly shouted. Sandra, those are from last year. You know I sent those to you when you wouldn't leave me alone. But she looked at Ryan, not me. Can you really trust her? Think about it. It was like watching a knife being slid between us, slow and deliberate. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck, clearly overwhelmed. I don't know what to say right now. Mom's voice cut through the tension. Sandra, enough. This is manipulative, and you know, you're embarrassing yourself. But Sandra just gave this little shrug, like she'd already planted the seed of doubt. And honestly, she had. Even if Ryan didn't believe her, the fact that she'd made him question me at all was exactly what she wanted. And I could feel myself unravelling, right there in the courthouse hallway, as everyone else stood frozen in the thick, suffocating silence Sandra had created. By the time we got to the steps outside the courthouse, the tension was unbearable. Ryan was quiet, pacing slightly, hands still in his pockets, while Sandra lingered behind him with that smug little smile that always made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream at her, drag her aside, make her admit she was lying, but I also knew that anything I said in that moment would look like I was overreacting. Brian, can we talk? I asked, my voice shaking more than I wanted. He nodded but didn't look at me immediately. He glanced at Sandra first, and I saw it, hesitation. That tiny flicker of doubt in his eyes. Sandra had gotten under his skin. I don't know what to believe anymore, he admitted, his voice low. I don't want to think you're hiding things from me, but I don't understand why she's saying this. My chest tightened. Ryan, please, listen to me. Sandra is twisting old messages. They are from months ago, from when Chris wouldn't stop contacting me. I even sent them to her to prove I was done with him. She's trying to manipulate you. Sandra snorted behind us. Manipulate? Come on. She's gaslighting you, Ryan. You need to wake up. I whipped around, furious. Sandra, shut the hell up. You don't get to decide what's real or not. Uncle David stepped closer, a warning in his eyes. Sandra, enough. This isn't some game. Step back. But she didn't step back. Instead, she tilted her head, feigning hurt. Uncle David, I'm just worried about him. I don't want Ryan to be blindsided. Mom finally snapped, her voice sharper than I've ever heard. Sandra, you're crossing every line. You're deliberately trying to hurt your sister and her relationship. How can you even stand there and lie so blatantly? Sandra's face hardened, the mask slipping slightly. I'm just being honest. You don't get it. Ryan rubbed his face, looking like he was about to explode from confusion and frustration. I don't know what's true. I don't want to be caught in this mess. I could feel tears prickling my eyes, not just from anger, but from this gnawing fear that Sandra might succeed in turning him against me. Ryan, please, I need you to trust me. You know me better than this. Please don't let her poison what we have. There was a long silence. Sandra's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second, but then she straightened up and walked a few steps away, muttering under her breath. Mom gave me a reassuring look, squeezing my shoulder, and Uncle David stayed on my side, protective but quiet. Ryan finally exhaled and took my hand. Okay, I'll believe you. I need a moment to process everything, that's all. The relief was instant, but tempered by lingering tension. Sandra was still there, lurking, like a shadow I couldn't shake, and I knew this wasn't over. She thrived on emotional chaos, and she'd just gotten a taste of it. But for that moment, Ryan's hand in mine reminded me that the truth still mattered and that, despite our manipulations, some bonds couldn't be broken that easily. We went back inside the courthouse because the property signing hadn't finished, but the tension followed us like a storm cloud. Every echo of footsteps, every distant murmur, felt amplified. Sandra trailed behind, whispering under her breath, but loud enough that I caught fragments. You'll see you'll regret trusting her. By the time we reached the clerk's office again, my nerves were shot. Ryan stayed close to me, gripping my hand like a lifeline, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He'd been caught in the middle of Sandra's manipulations, and even though he wanted to trust me, doubt lingered like smoke. Look, I muttered under my breath, keeping my voice low. We can't let her control this. Not here. Not now. Ryan nodded, taking a calming breath. I know. Just let's get this done. Sandra, of course, had other plans. As the clerk was handing over the last of the paperwork, she leaned in slightly toward Ryan. You know, relationships aren't always what they seem. Sometimes people lie to protect themselves or to play you. I slammed my hand down on the counter. Sandra, enough. Stop poisoning him. Everyone in the office turned to look. The clerk cleared her throat awkwardly. Is there a problem here? Mom shot Sandra a look that could have frozen fire. Yes, there's a problem. You are harassing people in a government building. Step back and let this end, now. Sandra's eyes flicked to Mom, then to Ryan. I just want him to know the truth, she said, almost sweetly. The truth? I spat, my voice trembling. Sandra, there is no truth in what you're doing. This is lies, manipulation, and you know it. Uncle David finally stepped in, his tone icy. Sandra, you are crossing a line that will have real consequences if you care about anyone here. You'll stop this behavior immediately. That was the moment Ryan finally turned to me, his expression a mixture of relief and lingering unease. Sandra, enough. I trust her. I trust you. You've made your point. Stop. Sandra froze, like someone had hit her with cold water. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd realized she'd gone too far. But then she straightened, lips pressed together, and muttered something I could barely hear. Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. Mom exhaled sharply. Finally. I felt the adrenaline drain from my body, replaced by shaky relief. Ryan squeezed my hand, giving me a small, reassuring smile. We survived that, he said quietly. I leaned into him, grateful, but also wary. Sandra wasn't gone, she was just retreating. She had always been like this. Emotional manipulation was her weapon, and she wielded it without guilt. But at least, for now, the immediate storm had passed. As we walked out of the courthouse, the sunlight hitting our faces felt almost miraculous. I looked at Ryan and smiled weakly. Next time, let's avoid courthouses for family drama. He chuckled softly, though I could see the tension hadn't completely left him. A deal, but hey, if we survive Sandra, we can survive anything. And for the first time that day, I believed it. The days after the courthouse incident were tense, but also oddly quiet. Sandra didn't make any more public scenes, at least not immediately. I assumed she was regrouping, plotting her next move, which honestly made me nervous. With her, it was never truly over. Ryan and I tried to settle into a normal rhythm again. We had dinner at home, quiet conversations, and a lot of long silences as we processed what had happened. He kept checking in with me, making sure I was okay, and I tried to reassure him that the worst was behind us. Mom, meanwhile, was relentless in keeping Sandra in check. She didn't confront her aggressively, but she made sure her boundaries were clear. To Sandra, Mom said one afternoon, voice firm, I will not tolerate manipulation. You've embarrassed yourself, and you've hurt people who love you. Enough is enough. Sandra's reaction was classic. She tilted her head, narrowed her eyes slightly, and said, I'm just trying to help. Everyone else is overreacting. Mom didn't flinch. Helping isn't twisting truths to turn people against each other. You need to learn the difference. I felt a quiet sense of relief hearing that. It was like Mom's authority gave me back some control after the chaos. But even as Sandra retreated into her own corner, the emotional damage lingered. Ryan and I spent hours talking about trust, manipulation, and boundaries. I realized how easily someone can try to worm their way into a relationship with subtle lies and half-truths, especially when they know you care deeply about family. One evening, Ryan brought it up. You know, part of me was upset with you for even letting her near us, but I also get that I can't blame you for her behavior. She's tricky. I laughed softly, shaking my head. Tricky? That's putting it lightly. Sandra is an emotional ninja, but you handled it better than I expected. You didn't explode. You didn't yell mostly. He grinned. Mostly? Thanks for the compliment. Uncle David even sent me a text later that week, something like, I've seen a lot of family drama, kid, but that courthouse scene, Sandra did herself proud of you for standing your ground. It felt good to have allies. I knew that as long as we were cautious and communicated, Sandra's manipulations wouldn't have the power they did in that courthouse hallway. And Sandra? She kept her distance for a while, lurking in the background but not interfering directly. It was as if she realized she had pushed too far and had finally been called out in front of witnesses. Still, I knew this wasn't the end of her games. But for now, Ryan and I had survived. And in a weird way, going through that storm together had strengthened us. We had faced manipulation, lies, and emotional warfare, and we came out on the other side, holding onto each other. For the first time in a long time, I felt like Sandra's chaos couldn't touch the bond we'd built. And that thought, powerful and calming, was exactly what I needed. Just when I thought we were finally in the clear, Sandra made one last attempt to stir the pot. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first. She didn't confront us directly this time. Instead, she tried to worm her way into our social circles, dropping little hints and half-truths designed to make Ryan doubt me again. It started at a family brunch at Mom's house. Sandra sidled up to Ryan while I was setting the table, voice low but sweet, almost conspiratorial. You know, I'm just worried. I mean, sometimes people say one thing but do another. I'd hate for you to get blindsided again. Ryan's eyes flickered toward me, and I could see the faint shadow of doubt creep in. My chest tightened. I wanted to snap at her, but I caught Ryan's hand under the table and gave it a reassuring squeeze. That silent connection reminded him, and me, that we were still a team. After brunch, I pulled Ryan aside into the kitchen. She's trying to manipulate you again, I said firmly, keeping my voice calm. She thrives on emotional chaos, but we don't have to give her the power. Ryan nodded, running a hand through his hair. I know, honestly, I was annoyed she even came here. I almost let her words get to me for a second, but I remembered what happened at the courthouse. I trust you. Hearing that made my stomach relax. I realized that while Sandra could plant seeds of doubt, she couldn't control the forest of trust Ryan and I had built together. Later that week, Mom decided to confront Sandra directly. She called her into her study, and from what I could overhear, it was intense. Mom didn't yell, but her voice carried authority. Sandra, this stops now. You've caused enough confusion and stress. If you want a relationship with the family, you need to own your behavior. No more lies, no more manipulations. Sandra argued, of course, but there was a subtle change in her tone. For the first time in a long while, she didn't have the upper hand. She left the study looking frustrated and quiet, a far cry from her usual swagger. That night, Ryan and I sat together, decompressing. You know it, he said, sipping his coffee. She's relentless. But honestly, I'm glad we faced it together. It makes me more certain about us. I smiled, leaning against him. Me too. Sandra can try all she wants, but she can't touch what we have if we stay honest with each other. And in that moment, I realized something important. Emotional manipulation can be powerful, but only if you let it in. By standing firm, supporting each other, and confronting lies head-on, we'd weathered Sandra's storm. It wasn't just survival, it was a lesson in boundaries, trust, and resilience. And I finally felt like our relationship and my sense of self were stronger than ever, even in the shadow of Sandra's chaos. The final closure came quietly, without fireworks or drama. Sandra didn't try to push anymore. It was almost anticlimactic, but in a good way. I think she realized that her old tactics no longer had the effect they once did. She still had her pride and her smug little smile, but she kept it to herself, looking in the background without trying to interfere. A few weeks later, Mom called a family dinner, not the kind where drama usually erupts, but a neutral, casual gathering at her place. Sandra was there, of course, but this time she stayed mostly silent. The tension that had gripped us at the courthouse was gone, replaced by careful civility. Ryan and I arrived together, and for the first time, I felt completely at ease in Sandra's presence. She made a comment about the dessert and smiled politely, but there was no attempt to manipulate or sway anyone. It was like a weight had been lifted. After dinner, I caught Mom in the kitchen. She's quieter than usual, I said, raising an eyebrow. Mom chuckled softly. She's learning. You can't force someone to change, but you can set boundaries. That courthouse showdown was necessary. It showed her that her usual tactics wouldn't work anymore, and she knows it. Ryan joined us, leaning against the counter with that reassuring grin of his. Honestly, I never thought we'd get to this point without some huge fight, but we did. I trust you completely, and I don't think she can shake that anymore. I smiled, feeling a profound sense of relief. All those anxious days, the doubt, the fear that Ryan might see her lies as truth, it had come full circle. Sandra hadn't won. We had weathered the storm, not by yelling or retaliating, but by staying grounded, truthful, and united. Later, I found myself reflecting on everything: the courthouse chaos, the whispers, the screenshots, the emotional manipulation. Sandra had always been clever at planting seeds of doubt, but she couldn't control what we felt for each other, the trust we built, or our ability to communicate openly. Even though she remained a presence in our lives, I realized that she no longer had the power to disrupt us. That, in itself, was a victory. Not just over Sandra, but over fear, doubt, and the emotional games that had tried to pull us apart. As Ryan and I walked home that evening, hand in hand, the city lights reflecting on the pavement, I felt lighter than I had in months. We have faced emotional manipulation, tested our trust, and come out stronger on the other side. And for the first time, I understood. Family chaos might always exist, but it doesn't define the strength of the bonds we choose to protect. Sandra's interference had forced us to confront our fears. Yes, but it also proved that honesty, patience, and loyalty could triumph over manipulation. We survived Sandra. And this time, we were unshakable.